So we wanted to know more about the Commissioner of Insurance and Safety Fire. And since Mr. Wilson ran for that position, this is what we had to ask him about, and this is what he had to say.
Insurance commissioner is one of the most powerful, important statewide positions that we have in Georgia. So if you think about it, we've got 13 state leaders that we elect statewide every 4 years. And it goes all the way from governor all the way to members of the Public Service Commission. And insurance commissioner is one of those down ballot races, meaning, it's not the top of the ballot, not the top of the ticket. It doesn't get a lot of news coverage. You're not going to read about it in the newspaper every day. You're not going to see it on TV really ever. Yeah. But it is an incredibly important position because the insurance commissioner is one of the only statewide positions that has executive, legislative, and judicial authority granted by our state constitution. And as the name makes obvious, one of the main duties of the insurance commissioner is to regulate our multi-billion-dollar insurance market in Georgia, which affects all of our lives in many, 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 many ways. The government requires us to carry auto insurance. We used to have health insurance. Now we don't have to have it anymore, but it's a necessity of life. And if you're in a business of any form, chances are, either you're required to carry some form of insurance or you've got to have insurance for your company. And all of those companies are regulated by the insurance commissioner. They can't even sell their product in the state unless they get a license first from the insurance commissioner. So you're talking about one person in charge of a department that has an incredible amount of power and responsibility in Georgia.
So just to clarify, it's any insurance?
That's right. It is all forms of insurance.
Life insurance, health insurance,
That's right.
Car insurance,
auto insurance,
home
cyber insurance, dental insurance. The insurance industry has really evolved over the last century, honestly. And now you can buy insurance for anything. There is a market for just about anything. If you want to pay somebody to issue you an insurance policy for the paper on your desk, someone will sell you an insurance policy. But first, they've got to have a license to sell that product in the state of Georgia.
We also asked Mr. Wilson, what does the Commissioner of Insurance and Safety Fire actually do? And this is what he had to tell us.
This is one of the things that makes the insurance commissioner's role so unique from the other statewide positions because, and it's kind of similar to governor in this way, in that it impacts everybody. The Secretary of State's office is it's become a very well-known office just through the news lately and through current events, but if you don't vote, or if you don't own a business that has to file incorporation or licenses every year, you don't deal with the Secretary of State's office. The Attorney General's office is very important, but if you're not in litigation or working through the criminal justice system, you don't interact with the Attorney General's office. The Insurance Commissioner's office is different. Every single Georgian is affected by this office every single day because of the two main roles that this office has. So the first one we talked about is insurance and all forms of insurance: auto, home, health, life, business insurance, and regulating that market to make sure that there actually is a market, meaning you actually have choices. There are something like 140 counties in this state where there's only one health insurance provider if you fall within a certain range, and that is a direct result of the policies of the insurance commissioner's office. Also, when companies sell their policies in Georgia, the insurance commissioner has a lot of regulatory authority. He can issue rules that have the same effect of law that says what you can have in policies and what you're not allowed to have. So for example, it is still permissible in Georgia to discriminate against people based on indirect factors of race, socioeconomic status, gender, LGBTQ status, a number of other things. Now, the law, the Georgia legislature has passed a law saying you cannot discriminate when you sell insurance based on the color of Georgians' skin. Okay, not directly, but what we know and what anyone.
Other ways to dictate.
That's right. There are countless other ways that we know of indirect characteristics that themselves aren't based on race, but correlate to race, right? And the insurance market is focusing on these things. The commissioner has the power to stop that and say, for example, you can't include credit history for auto insurance because we're not selling you insurance based on your credit worthiness. We're selling you insurance based on whether you're a safe driver or not. So all these other factors, whether you live in an apartment or a home, shouldn't play any factor in how much you pay for auto insurance because it doesn't affect how safe you are as a driver. That's the insurance side. The insurance commissioner also is our state's safety fire commissioner. And I know what you're thinking. You say safety fire.
Yeah,
I think
what
he
does that
means
mean?
fire safety. So back in the 1960s when the state constitution was amended to include this portion, for some reason they called it safety fire at the time instead of fire safety. It's kind of anachronistic with the name, but the insurance commissioner is the chief state fire marshal.
Oh.
And so the commissioner is in charge of regulating fire departments and their training, making sure that they're going through the proper training. Anyone who's been to a school or a church or a public building knows that the fire marshal, sets certain regulations. Those regulations are pushed down by the insurance commissioner, and so part of that job also includes regulating the safety of every elevator, escalator, amusement park ride, or scaffolding in this state. And so that touches pretty much everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
At some point, you're going to ride in an elevator or an escalator, and so whether we're talking about people's personal safety, just going about their daily lives, or making sure in the insurance marketplace that as a consumer that their needs are met and that they're taken care of, the insurance commissioner has a lot of power to affect your bottom line.
We wanted to know what Mr. Wilson thought about why it's important that voters vote for this position and why we educate ourselves on this position. And he has some dialogue for us there too.
It's hard to say you shouldn't educate yourself about every single office on the ballot, but let's be honest. I mean, people don't have a lot of time, and I get it. I live and breathe this every day, so it's easy for me to just look at the ballot and recognize some names and know where to go for information. This office in particular, it's really difficult to find information about not just the candidates, but the office. One of the candidates on the ballot this year is an incumbent. It's very difficult for people to even look at and see what his record has been since he's been elected, because this office just isn't covered very much in the media. It's one of those very boring, sort of bureaucratic offices. That doesn't mean it's not important. And the candidates, in particular in this election, 2022, there's a big contrast between the policies that they want to put in place. And I really think that if you visit the candidates' websites, which you can see, if you pull up your ballot, your sample ballot online, you'll be able to see the names. Just Google the names, and you'll come up with their campaign websites. You'll get a feel for the values that they're seeking to represent. And that will tell you a lot about what they would be like as insurance commissioner. Because again, remember, this office has the power to put in place rules and regulations that are basically the law to affect whether or not all Georgians are treated equally in the insurance marketplace. I think if you take a close look at the campaign websites, you'll understand the difference between the two. And another thing I'll say is, if you do just a quick Google search for Georgia Insurance Commissioner and click on the news tab and just look at the news articles, this office has actually, because it is so powerful, it also has episodes of the most corrupt politicians in state history have come through this office, insurance
Wow.
commissioner, because it's so powerful. And at the same time, because it's down ballot, not many people are paying attention to it. So they can get away with a lot. And if you want to talk about the fact that there's one person who regulates a multi-billion-dollar industry in this state that they all have to come to get a license for, that one person has a tremendous amount of power. And all those insurance companies, guess what they do? They write campaign checks, right? And none of the current candidates, have suffered from this. But in the past, you talk about names like John Oxendine or Jim Beck, who was just sentenced to who's serving in federal prison right now because of his corruption in that office. Because this office is so powerful, it has had those ugly episodes of corruption.
So Mr. Wilson mentioned to us that the insurance commissioner actually has executive, judicial, and legislative powers. We wanted to understand that better, so we asked, and this is what he had to say.
So when I say that they have executive, legislative, and judicial authority, and they're one of the few, if not only, statewide offices that have all three. We all learned, about our three branches of government in civics class, right?
Yeah.
And, when we think about the governor, for example, being the head of the executive branch of their job is to enforce the law and carry it out. But we also know the governor, in particular in Georgia, which we have a very strong governor that has more powers than perhaps in other states. The governor in Georgia can issue executive orders that are basically as if the legislature were to pass a law. He's not allowed to do that just on anything, or he or she. They're kind of boxed into very limited issues that they're allowed to do that, and typically they're time limited because the legislature meets part-time every year, and so when the legislature comes back, those orders typically expire and it moves over to the legislature. The insurance commissioner is very similar to that. The legislature has said, look, we're a part-time state legislature. We're not like Congress. We're not here legislating every single day of the year. We are only in session for the legislature 3 months out of the whole year. And then we go back and do our other jobs. So the rest of that time, we can't pass laws unless some emergency occurs like happened in the pandemic. While we're gone, though, somebody's got to be updating laws. And so the way that we've sort of struck a balance with that in our state constitution is that we give statewide officials like the insurance commissioner broad authority to regulate their department. Unless the legislature says you can't do that, then usually the insurance commissioner can issue a regulation that has the force of law. Now, if the legislature is unhappy with what the commissioner has done, they can pass a law saying you can't do that, or they can change it and edit it, however they want to. But all that to say that the insurance commissioner has very broad authority. And then, in addition to that, that person also has judicial authority because the insurance commissioner's office hears appeals. For example, if you have a complaint against your insurance company, let's say that you had some damage to your house and you filed a claim on your homeowner's insurance policy, and the insurance company is denying your claim because of whatever reason. And you think that your policy says that they should cover the damage. You can file a complaint with the insurance commissioner and basically litigate the claim with the insurance commissioner. It reaches a point in that process where the commissioner actually sits almost like a judge and hears both sides and issues a ruling. That's very different than a lot of the other departments that we have statewide. And so that's what I mean when I say that the commissioner has judicial authority.
We asked Representative Wilson why he thought this election was so important, and this is what he had to say.
Y'all, 2022 in Georgia is critical. And, I don't even have to tell you why. I mean, everybody, I think, who lives in this state, who's even been in this state for, just since the summer, can feel it in their bones. And if not in their bones, at least when they turn the TV on or listen to the radio or try to navigate any social media site, right? Every single ad is going to be a political ad, right? And that's because there is so much at stake. This election, we're not just deciding who's going to represent us in the legislature for the next 2 years, who's going to represent us in the governor's office for the next 4 years, or the insurance commissioner's office for the next 4 years. We're talking about picking leaders who are going to dictate the direction our state moves in for the next 40 years. Georgia is at this tipping point where we're kind of equally balanced with partisans, right? With Democrats and Republicans, and some people in the middle who kind of go back and forth just depending on the candidate. We've got this state. We continue to grow. Our economy is thriving, unlike a lot of our neighbor states. We've got a lot of stuff moving in our direction, but our current makeup of state government and the laws and regulations that we have are mostly holdovers from the last 40 years. There's not a lot of updating that has occurred, and certainly no vision setting for where we want to be in the next 40 years. And so when I talk about how critical this race is, that's the thing that I want to communicate is we need to find leaders who will paint a vision for where we want to be in the next 40 years and then push us in that direction. Because that's the only way that we're going to be able to continue the success and to live out the potential that we know this state has.
We asked Representative Wilson if he had anything else to share with us, and you don't want to miss out on what he had to say to us.
Yeah, I will highlight an episode that occurred last year that I think really highlights the importance of having the right person in the Commissioner of Insurance role. There was a young high school graduate who had enrolled in a sports academy to play football. And basically, he didn't get a football scholarship to college, but was very talented and thought if he just worked on his athleticism for another year, could probably get a college scholarship on football. So he enrolled in one of these football academies that actually happens to be located in the heart of Atlanta, of downtown Atlanta. And so basically they run like a school for a year. It's mostly focused on athletics, but there's some academics involved as well. They house all of the students in a student dormitory. And this dormitory had several elevators. Well, because it's a public building, those elevators had to be inspected by the insurance commissioner. Fast forward, tragically, this young man was killed when the elevator in that building, one of the elevators in that building that he was riding in, fell. And he was trying to escape along with a number of his other classmates. Some of them were able to escape the elevator. He was not, and unfortunately was crushed to death in the accident. And all of his classmates on the elevator watching this horrific scene. As horrible as that was for his family, for his friends and classmates, the worst part about that was what came out shortly after his death. The other students started complaining and saying, "We knew this elevator was unsafe. We've been complaining about this elevator to the state for 2 years." Every elevator you get in the state has a framed business card. It's really an inspection certificate is what it is, right? And it says on there, Office of Insurance Commissioner with a phone number, and it has the inspection date and when that inspection expires. It's only good for a year. That elevator had not been inspected by the state in over 2 years.
Wow.
And, when that information came out, obviously there was a lot of heat placed on the insurance commissioner. How did you let this happen? Why did this elevator go 2 years without an inspection when it's supposed to be inspected every year? And the occupant of that office, who is the incumbent on the ballot this fall said, well, it's the responsibility of the property owner. If they don't call us and tell us to come out and inspect the elevator, we don't actually know the elevator needs inspecting.
What?
Well, let me tell you. Let me just ask this, does that make you feel safe?
No.
It doesn't make me feel safe either. And if the state of Georgia is signing off on the safety of that elevator, along with every other elevator in this state, then I at least want them to know where the elevators are and when the last time is that they inspected it. Because they put a certificate framed in the corner of that elevator saying, we certify this elevator is safe. So that's why it's so important that we put the right person in this office. Not only to save all of us more money when it comes to insurance rates and premiums, but to make sure that when we get in an elevator in this state, we know and we can trust that it'll be safe.
So today we had a wonderful conversation, and I hope that you learned more about the state position in which we talked about today. Don't forget that early voting has started. We need your vote, and you have until November 8th. Please stay tuned. Please make sure you share these videos with somebody else, and don't forget to get out and voice your opinion by voting.